I have the very good fortune when I'm not doing work for the Leadership Forum community, working for a company named Anthem. And Anthem's strategic intent is to improve the health of humanity. Pretty big, bold, audacious goal, but it is something that makes all of us who work at Anthem feel very good about what we do and why we're doing it. I also have the great good fortune of working with a team of individuals who inspire me on a day in, day out basis as they lead, as they contribute to employers across the US in what they do and how they improve the health and well-being of their employees. And I will simply say that this group of people that you'll be meeting with and interacting with in the next hour and a half or so are great leaders. And they're great leaders because they view the world through the lens of emotional well-being, bringing their clinical psychology backgrounds and their account management and simply their humanity to what they do. And we'll talk about leading in unprecedented times. And with that, I will turn it to my colleague, Dr. David Wright.
Thank you, Howard. Hello, everyone. I am David Wright. I know I met some of you in some of the breakout groups yesterday, and what a day it was yesterday. I'm one of the presenters for this section, and I'm going to introduce the provocateurs who will be leading our discussion about leading in unprecedented times. And starting with myself, I'm a psychologist. I am in Denver, Colorado. I work at Anthem. I am passionate about mental health and wellness for individuals, for our communities, and within corporate culture. At this critical moment in our communities, it is more vital than ever that we strive to improve the mental health of humanity. So I'm very excited to lead this discussion with our colleagues today. And joining us today, we have Mark Duffy. Mark is a board certified coach and a licensed professional counselor with almost 2 decades in the EAP field. And on top of his clinical work, Mark has delivered trainings for years on various wellness and communication topics. Mark is currently a national client executive for Anthem EAP and has worked with companies of all sizes from 10-person startups to Fortune 20 corporations. Mark focuses on helping companies create cultures of wellness, and I'm proud to say Mark is a neighbor of mine right here in Denver, just down the street from me. Another provocateur, Mike Selman. Mike's a licensed professional counselor and a certified mental health disaster responder, and he works at Anthem as a client executive for behavioral health and EAP. Mike has 17 years of providing all sorts of therapy to adolescents and families in intensive family settings, juvenile courts, and in a public school system. Mike lives in Atlanta, and he is civic-minded, serving as a vice chairman with a nonprofit organization focused on educational and social readiness. Mike has a master's in counseling psychology and also an MBA. So be careful, he's mighty wicked smart. And then we also have Casey Schroeder with us. Casey is a licensed professional counselor. She works at Anthem as a behavioral health and EAP client executive. She has 20 years of experience in the behavioral health field. She started her career with clinical work with individuals in hospitals. She's been with Anthem now for 10 years and connects commercial clients to their emotional wellness, their mental health benefits and resources. Casey lives in Charleston, South Carolina, that we discussed, a community we discussed yesterday. And she enjoys going to the beach. She enjoys cooking and being outdoors. And her role as mother is her greatest adventure. Casey is going to start us off today with a quick technical lesson about the interactive tools that we'll be using throughout our session today. So with that, Casey, I'll give it to you.
Hey everyone, so excited to be here with you today. Yeah, so wanted to go over a couple of Zoom tools with you all. The goal of our next hour or so with you is to really have an interactive discussion. We really want to hear from you. We want to learn from you. Me and my fellow provocateurs, we know we're smart. What we are smart enough to know we're not the smartest people in this room. So please speak up. So 3 tools I just want to go over really quickly to make sure that you guys know how to access chat. I think all of us know how to access chat, but just in case, if you want to talk to us via chat, scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom page here. A toolbox will, or toolbar will appear. Click on chat, start typing away. Let us know your thoughts, your questions. The other tool that I wanted to point out is raise your hand. If you need our attention, if you have a burning thought or question, please use this tool. You can find it by scrolling down again to the bottom of your Zoom page, clicking on reaction. A tool kind of box will pop up and you can click on raise hand. There's also different emojis in that toolbox. So if you are one who loves emojis, go ahead, let us know how you're feeling through those as well. Lastly, we're going to do a couple of annotation exercises, and I'm not sure how familiar folks are with this tool. This is one of actually my favorite tools in the Zoom feature here. And this lets us see words on the screen itself, on our slides, and really hear from you guys. So if we ask you a question, instead of typing into chat, you can actually put it on the slide here. And the way you access the annotation tool is you go to the top of your Zoom page, highlight view options, click on that, and you will see annotate. Click on annotate and another toolbox or toolbar will appear. And you can either click on text or you can click on like a pen. Text is a little bit easier to maneuver than the pen, but either one will work, whatever your preference is. So before we dive in today, I thought we would give the annotation tool just a quick run through. So if you guys don't mind using that right now and letting us know, where are you joining us from today? Where is everybody located? Looks like North Carolina, New Orleans, nice. Connecticut, Colorado, New Jersey. Someone's trying to use the pen. It's hard, isn't it? I think the pen's than the text.
It's hard.
Yeah. Alabama. See some fellow Southerners, thank goodness. Awesome. Well, we can't wait to hear from you guys today. Thank you for giving the annotation tool a shot here. Great to see where you all are from.
So let's clear those, and we are going to move on to our next piece. We all experienced unprecedented times in 2020. The impact of COVID-19 was felt in every part of the globe. We lost jobs, businesses, the ability to comfort those we care about, and the opportunity to grieve together. Issues of social injustices were brought to the forefront, and the differences in our beliefs were on full display. Some groups fought for things like autonomy and for sacred rights like democracy, while others simply tried to just stop our world from burning. With all that's happened in 2020, it's no surprise that 71% of leaders reported it being the most difficult of their career. Our world has experienced significant trauma over the past year and a half, and as leaders, we're going to play a key role in helping to repair it. Part of that requires us to stop and think about our own impact and what we've been through in this past year. So we're going to start with a little annotation exercise that Casey mentioned here. And what we're going to ask you to do is, in one word, describe what you as a leader have faced in the last 18 months. Let's see what everybody has to say. Uncertainty, that's for sure. anxiety, almost daily, unhappiness, fear, isolation, mental health challenges, grief, fear again, staying positive for those in extreme stress. That's more than one word, but we'll allow it. Disconnection. Oh my gosh, that's one we worked with so often with companies. Employees feeling disconnected. Tiny. Oh, I like that. Overwhelmed. Yeah. And think about this as a leader. This is all impacting how you show up. This is impacting how you respond to the people that look to you to lead. And so we're going to be talking about these things. We're going to be talking about how do we manage them, not only in ourselves, but how do we help other people as they go through them. We see more coming up here: isolation, vulnerability. These are great. Thank you. I think this is a good start. I'm going to clear all of us to keep going here. The world is moving into another phase. We're going out again and being with friends, attending sporting events, and spending time with the ones we care about the most. And although we're excited, we're also very fearful of what's about to happen or what's going to happen next. And as leaders, we need to understand all the emotions that might be going on within our organization and within our community. I'd like to think we're evolved enough as beings to experience more than one emotion at a time. And these emotions will be different for everybody. And they can be both positive and negative simultaneously. One thing is clear though, the vast majority of us have experienced some level of trauma from this past year. And as leaders, our role is to understand the impact of this trauma, not only in ourselves, but in others, and how to support them as they work through their own trauma. So Casey, back to you.
So yeah, Mark just used a very powerful word, right? He stated that we've all experienced a great deal of trauma over the past 18 months, year and a half. And that word trauma, I think, it has such a heavy connotation to it, right? And it's been really used more and more as we have been living in the pandemic and in our post-2020 world. You know, pre-2020, I think I would have described trauma as, being exposed to a traumatic event. But post-2020, just like so much else, I think our understanding of trauma, maybe even the way we define trauma, has shifted a little bit. I think we've learned that not only can we experience trauma after being exposed to a traumatic event, but we can also experience trauma by not knowing the certainty of our own world and being scared about our future. In fact, one of the key indicators of trauma is viewing the world as a dangerous place. And although I would never want to speak for you all, I think it's a safe bet to say that at one point or the other over the past 18 months, all of us have viewed our world as a dangerous place. But trauma, like Mark indicated, it's not a fixed state. We can experience trauma and still experience joy. We can be working through our trauma and still be striving and thriving to do our best for our friends, for our family, community, and in our work. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to be picking on my co-panelists, my co-presenters here, and going to be asking them questions so that we can have a discussion about trauma. We're going to talk about trauma, define it, talk about how it affects our emotions, how it affects our bodies. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how we as leaders can still lead effectively, even if we are working through our own trauma or working with folks around us who have been traumatized. As I pick on my fellow presenters here and make them talk to us, I really hope that you guys also type in your responses to the questions, because we would love to learn from you all as well. Okay, so Dr. David Wright, you're looking very nice today. I think I'm gonna pick on you first. Can you do me a favor and define trauma and speak to how you think it's kind of shifted or changed over the last 18 months, our view of trauma?
Yeah, thanks, Casey. So The trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event, a traumatic event in our lives, things like accidents or assaults or natural disasters. And typically, immediately after the event, there's an onset of shock and denial that are typical. And this is all part of our natural human stress reaction. It's called an acute stress reaction. And really, trauma develops over time. It's a longer time development that includes a lot of unpredictable emotions, sadness, anger, denial. People have flashbacks about the event. They can't stop thinking about the event. They have a hard time shutting their brain off. And it can cause strained relationships with a preoccupation when somebody's anxious and hypervigilant. And it can cause a lot of physical symptoms as our bodies cope with this stress, things like headache or nausea. Prolonged stress causes a cortisol reaction in our bodies that has physical impacts. And these feelings, they're all normal human responses to a significant stress. We're built for this. And although we're built for this, they can cause significant impairment in how we live our lives. And some people have a really difficult time moving on and continuing to lead their lives as they once did. And so over the past year, over the past 18 months, many more of us have experienced trauma. It's touched many of us unexpectedly in unexpected ways. And that experience, I think, has changed how many of us think about trauma today. I suspect that many of us believed that only a catastrophic event like a war, a natural disaster, or personal assault would lead to trauma. But like Casey said, our definition of dangerous place has expanded. The uncertainty of the world that we live in has brought that stress home to many more of us. And our view of trauma has evolved to viewing it as more of a natural response to significantly stressful events in our lives. We've all been touched by this. Many of us have been touched by loneliness and uncertainty and isolation and anxiety. And we've learned that prolonged uncertainty can be just as traumatic as a certain catastrophic life event. So we want to hear your thoughts. We would love to see in chat, just respond to the question, how has your view or experience of trauma changed over the past year?
David, Charlie asks a good question. Can one experience internal self-only trauma?
No, we can be traumatized when we see things that happen to others. When we, in some ways, live vicariously, we can be traumatized by that with a fear of that happening to us. We can get very stuck on that event. We can have recurring images of those things that have happened to others and develop a fear around that happening to us as well. So the universality of trauma, but the uniqueness individually, that's a great point. And I think that's one of the key points is it's a universal event, but it impacts each of us, can impact each of us differently.
Yeah,
it's been so pervasive in ways I never expected. I was blind to how fearful I could be. I can relate. Casey, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you there, but I love what Sue said. You know, she brings up an excellent point, but I would say pre-2020, we saw trauma as more rare, right? Sue, like you're so right. It was something that you know happened after these significant events, and now it is becoming more normal. And there is something about normalizing trauma that helps us heal. It helps us make us feel not so isolated. So I love that comment.
Yeah. Lynette, I like what you said about how two siblings can carry different traumas, and how a twin sibling in the same situation can have trauma and the other can't. I think we learned a lot about resiliency yesterday, and I think we all have varying levels of resiliency, how we've learned to manage events that happen. And I think that's a real world example of being resilient. And Kim, you say that as well. So excellent. And trauma, David, is not a singular event. You're right. It can be an insidious series of things that happen to us. And Todd, I like the origin. Trauma is a wound of many different types. So great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Casey, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, Joel kind of hit a nail on the head there when he said trauma, it has become more frequent, right? And I think because it has been more frequent, we really need to understand how it affects us, how it affects our bodies, our minds, our emotions. So I'm going to pick on Mike Selman now. Mike, I hope you're paying attention. How do we know if someone's been traumatized, Mike? Can you answer that for us? What are some of the signs, the impacts that trauma has on our body and on our emotions?
Thanks a lot, Casey. As a licensed professional counselor for probably the past 17 years, some of the things that I've seen in terms of people experiencing symptoms of psychological trauma from an emotional and psychological symptom standpoint, and David touched on some of this earlier, but people experience shock, denial, disbelief, confusion, sometimes difficulty concentrating, anger, irritability, mood swings, anxiety, fear, guilt, shame, self-blame. There's a withdrawal from others sometimes, the feeling of sad or hopelessness, feeling disconnected or just numb. These are some of the emotional and psychological symptoms that I've witnessed over the years. Also, from a physical symptom standpoint, there's been where people can't sleep at night. They've had insomnia, nightmares, fatigue, just being startled easily, racing heartbeat. You know, I've heard that where people have come into the emergency rooms, edginess and agitation, aches and pains, and some muscle tension. One of the things I wanted to say is that definitely over in 2020, in terms of COVID, people experienced a lot of these, whether it was from an emotional or physical standpoint, but also within the civil unrest. Being African-American myself, a lot of people have come to me and saying, hey, I feel like I need an African-American therapist because of what's been going on, and just asking for suggestions in reference to that. And I have recommended that they look for a provider that specializes in trauma, because within the African-American community, we're not really used to going to counseling. We're not really used to seeking help. So, and therefore, we're not really used to understanding that an event that has taken place, we felt traumatized. I'll use my own example. My car stalled on me one day, and I was out in a neighborhood that was not predominantly African-American, and it was in the daytime. And as people were coming home from work, they kind of just slowed down and kind of looked at me. I wasn't dressed professional. I just had on shorts and a shirt. And it just appeared that it started making me feel nervous because of everything that's been going on, you know, in the world. And so I called the tow truck. They were waiting. And I think I waited for probably more than 2 hours, you know, for the tow truck. And I just started experiencing some of these same things, the emotional stuff. And, you know, I called and I started getting agitated. I was yelling at the tow truck and saying, where are you? I'm nervous. I'm scared. I'm in a neighborhood that's not mine. And people are just looking at me. And their response was like, call the police. And I was like, I really don't want to call the police either. So just a lot of things in terms of you may be feeling. And again, it may not be happening directly to you, but things that you witness that may be happening within the culture. So it all impacts you some type of way. So I would say this, we all react to trauma in different ways. Experiencing a wide range of physical and emotional reactions There's no right or wrong way to think, feel, or respond. So don't judge your own reactions or those of other people. Your responses are normal reactions to an abnormal event.
You know, Mike, thanks so much for sharing that story, because as somebody who knows you, I know that you're a pretty cool cucumber. You don't really freak out that much, and you definitely, I've never heard you raise your voice. So for you to have that reaction with the tow truck company tells me that trauma is alive and breathing, right? And I think we all kind of examine our own worlds and see our reactions. Maybe we can identify our own trauma as well. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think it was really important.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So would anybody else like to via chat share a little bit about how, they might have been impacted by trauma? I know it's a very personal thing, but if you feel like sharing, that would be great too.
Hi, if I might share this quickly, I've done a lot of third world country work in third world countries over the last 25 years, and COVID made me realize at a very, very different level that trauma goes well beyond what might be a preconceived notion of, oh, that nation has them all the time. That nation, that's a normal reaction in that country. And it's made me step back and realize we're all in this together. It doesn't matter whether you're first tier country or a third tier country.
Charlie, I could not agree with you more, right? I think our reaction, trauma, it's universal. No one's safe from it. And the only way that we get through it, right, is having conversations like this, normalizing it, right? And saying that, it can happen to you, and being very cognizant of it. So thank you. Okay, I'm going to move on to my last victim here, Mark Duffy. I am going to ask you a question, and I hope you all respond in chat as well. How do you think we can lead effectively when either ourselves or someone on our team has been traumatized or is working through trauma? What are your thoughts about that?
I think Eric hit on it in our prior session. A lot of it has to do around education and awareness, being able to understand what people might be going through if they're going through trauma or experiencing trauma, understanding the goal. I love this definition of working with someone through trauma. What we're trying to do is to get them to remember the event without reliving it. And so sometimes that works well when people remember the event, sometimes it doesn't. Getting past trauma isn't linear, and having that awareness of the fact that there could be triggers to people that is going to cause them to experience those traumatic emotions again helps you increase that awareness, kind of like that cigar. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And so once you start realizing that it's not just going to move in a straight line, there can be step backs, and you need to be aware of those and making sure you're paying attention to them in others as well as in yourself. And so that is kind of my second point of introspection, being able to stop and say, what am I experiencing right now? And what's driving me to feel this way? Being able to take it back to that root cause. And then the last thing is self-care. What do you do to take care of yourself when you do realize that you're struggling? And this might not be for trauma, but just in general with the stress and anxiety and everything going on. But understanding that how you take care of yourself is going to impact how you lead, but it's also going to role model to other people that it's okay to acknowledge, hey, I'm really struggling with some trauma here. I feel like I've been traumatized, and I need to pause and take care of myself. I mean, that is a powerful message for a leader to relay to people, giving them almost permission to say, yeah, I need to pay attention to myself too, and I need to take the steps necessary for my own self-care. So that's what immediately comes to mind, but I want to see what other people are saying here in chat. So what else would you add in terms of leading effectively? let's see, coined the term post-traumatic boss disorder. I like that. I think we can all think back to a manager like that caused that for us. And so,
Mark, can I share my story for 1 second?
of course, Todd.
Yeah, I've had one of the things I'm known for is having some of the worst bosses who've ever set foot on this planet, and I've had many of them, mainly working in the entertainment industry out in Hollywood. But one time, real life experience. I teach at NYU, and I was in an NYU faculty meeting, and I looked across the room, and I saw someone familiar, and it was a boss from 20 years before, who was abusive, toxic, really just horrible. And before I even registered who she was in the whole story, my whole body reacted. My hands started shaking, my heart started pounding through my chest, and I felt like actually weak. Like I actually had to get up and go to the bathroom and splash water on my face. It's like my body reacted to flashing back on just how I was treated by her. And that was 20 years. So here I am, I'm an NYU professor. I'm 20 years later, and yet my whole body experienced that trauma of her abuse from all those years ago. So it's really amazing. And I write about that in my book. And that's why I started talking about post-traumatic boss disorder. It's actually not just the impact in the present day, but how it could linger with you for years later. And that was a real life experience just from a couple of years ago.
Well, and I mean, thank you for sharing. One, and you hit on it in terms of that was a trigger. Just seeing her again created a visceral reaction, and not to put words in your mouth, but I think for a lot of people, it creates feelings of powerlessness. You're immediately pulled back into that moment where you felt traumatized, and a lot of times we don't feel like we have much power or much control. And I'm guessing that's why you went and splashed some water on your face to collect yourself, is because those negative feelings came back. And so we need to be able to pause and recognize that in ourselves, because you could have responded a number of different ways, but what you chose to do was take a break and go regroup. But some people might not. They might power through that meeting or whatever, trying to shove those triggers and those visceral reactions down, and then all of a sudden that impacts how they're responding and how they're showing up.
Yeah. William Wordsworth coined the term emotion recollected in tranquility as it relates to poetry. But so it could be a positive thing, like you could picture daffodils in your mind and you go back to seeing them. So it could be a positive recollection, or it could be a negative one. But again, your body and your mind experience that emotion as if it's happening right there in the moment. And so those are happen again, positive examples and as well as negative examples.
Hey, Mark.
Yes.
Robert Schott here in New Jersey. In high school, we had an exchange student live with us from Johannesburg, South Africa, and we've remained connected. I put in the chat that her work is as a trauma counselor. And what I learned from Margaret is that the speed to care for individuals in a traumatic situation is essential to the emotional management, which is what she does. Whether it's a woman who's been raped or a violent incident or any number of things that she rushes out to give this care. She does travel around South and other parts of Africa to provide her care services. So maybe you could remark on that.
That's really cool. And you're right, that speed to care is crucial, and it needs to be done appropriately. In our field, the EAP field, we do what are called critical incident responses. They used to be known as critical incident stress debriefings. And the old model had people almost immediately sit in a group setting, either at work or a few days afterwards, or right then at work or a few days after, and they would push people to recall what they saw or what they experienced. And the data came back showing that's way too quick. People aren't ready for that. They need to be cared for and taken care of, but asking them to recall it right then when it's so fresh wasn't helpful. And so you're right, that speed to care is crucial, as well as the approach we take when we do get there and ready to care for somebody. So like Casey said, there are so many smart people in this audience that we know we don't know everything. So I've enjoyed just seeing everything come in and hearing the comments everybody has added so far. I think it's time to move on to the next piece here.
Casey spoke to you about the impact of trauma on leaders and people. I would like to transition our conversation to the recovery phase and to speak to you about how to foster a positive psychological environment within your organization. So let's begin a little bit of conversation about what leaders can and should do within the work environment. First phase here is to lead by example. The first thing you can do and should do as a leader, it's important for management to lead by example through asking for upward feedback, acknowledging mistakes, and seeking different opinions and being approachable. Self-care is vital to greater success. We all need rest to free ourselves from consistently stressful, connected environments. So the most important thing you can do for yourself as a leader is to get enough sleep, exercise regularly, put down the electronics, and spend time with family and friends. You cannot effectively lead your organization through a crisis if you're not well enough. Example, I have clients who have created what they call a paid time off campaign for their associates to take time away from the job, recharge, reconnect with family priorities. And as a manager with direct reports, you must lead by example in this process. The second thing you can do can and should do as a leader is to encourage active listening. Leaders must be proactive in their efforts and deeply care about how people around them are genuinely doing. When you're in an office setting, it's much easier to walk around and observe how someone's day is going, whether it be good or bad. Digitally, it becomes harder to check in on others. This means proactively asking questions like, how are you doing these days? Actually taking time to listen. So instead of just jumping on a Zoom call and immediately diving into work-related matters, just take a moment to show you care. Example, in our own company, they created an hour Zoom call every week during the pandemic in 2020, just to talk about non-work related items to just ensure that we were all doing okay. Very positive, very powerful, and very meaningful, and it went a long ways. The third thing you can do and should do as a leader is to create a safe psychological environment. Create an environment where people feel a sense of belonging. Our company sends out a survey every year just asking us if we feel like our manager cares about us and our opinions. I'm a true believer that people are more fulfilled in their work, especially when they believe that people around them care as them being human beings. One team, one company, leaders should always strive to create an environment where people feel this sense of belonging. And finally, what leaders can and should do is develop an open mindset. Adaptability is key here. Flexibility and being able to make quick, informed decisions is crucial for business to remain successful. Some people will need to work from home. Some people will need to work from the office. There needs to be a hybrid situation depending on what's best for your success. Leaders should sit down on a regular basis and prioritize running through hypothetical situations like what would happen to business if X happened, or what would happen if we lost Y. Being just optimistic about the future, especially during uncertain times, without sugarcoating the present, is essential to great leadership. So these are just 4 things that I think leaders can and should do to lead effectively as we move forward into the future. As a licensed professional counselor of cognitive behavioral therapy, it's kind of like a fascinating philosophy method of how we have shown clients in therapeutic environments how thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are connected. So today, with your permission, I would just like to introduce you to the ABC model of cognitive behavioral therapy, which was created by our founder, Dr. Albert Ellis. ABC model, the A stands for activating events, which can be external or internal circumstances. The B stands for your belief about the activating event, which can be rational or irrational. The C stands for the consequences to your beliefs, which could be positive or negative. I would just like to share a couple of examples with you regarding this model, just so you grasp the understanding of how it works. So for example, my boss sends me an email at 4 o'clock on Friday, asking me and everyone on the team to read a brief over the weekend to prepare for an unexpected client meeting on Monday morning. A, the email is the actual activating event. This is something you have absolutely no control over. Your boss sent it. B, my belief is my boss is trying to mess up my weekend. He has nothing better else to do. Why can't he read the brief and brief us on Monday, but he wants to interrupt my weekend? C, the consequences of this is I decide to go golfing because I believe the assignment is not that important and my boss should allow more time for us in advance. Monday morning comes, my boss ends up rewarding the person who came to the meeting with a plan of action, which wasn't me. Another example of the ABC model is you actually receive an email from a client stating that we just didn't do enough to help them through the COVID-19 with appropriate health recommendations. Again, A, the email complaint is the activating event, something you have no control over. B, my belief is that the client is feeling some anxiety, some stress, some uncertainty about the future. C, the consequences, I call up the client to set up a meeting. We discuss his or her frustrations and offer some additional moral support and give the client a listening ear and to provide some immediate concerns. I also then go to my coworkers, boss for any suggestions. I email these to the client. The client comes back, they're very appreciative and talks highly of how we were there for them during a critical moment. So as you can see in these situations with the ABC model, A, your activating events is something you have absolutely no control over. B is your beliefs about the activating event. And C, the consequences to your beliefs could be positive or negative based on how you think. I'm going to pause right here. So before we move into our next exercises to put this in practical application with David, I'm told we're going to take at least a 5-minute break here at this moment before we move on to the next exercise.
Like, I think we're going to take the break after the breakout group. I think between
Gotcha.
while it's fresh on people's mind. And Mike, first, I would never send you an email at 4 on a Friday. I would wait till Sunday. So keep that in mind. So this is our first breakout opportunity of this segment, and we're going to break out into groups of 4 for about 9 minutes and really see the ABC rubric in action and really try to practice the ABC rubric. I'm going to drop 3 questions into chat for each group to work on, and then we're going to reconvene after about 9 minutes, and Mike's just going to check in around any key learnings that you had, any key insights, anything that you want to share that comes out of your breakout group. So I'll drop these questions into chat, but I just want to preview them for you. So first question that we'd like you to talk about, for you in your organization, whether it be your company, your community, a nonprofit, whatever group you're associating with, what are the specific activating events that you recognized? What were the key these past 12 to 18 months? The second question is, what core beliefs guided how the organization or leaders responded? And then the third question is, what responses either improved recovery, what responses slowed it down? Basically, what actions led to what specific results? So we are going to break you out into groups of 4 for about 9 minutes. I'll drop these into chat and we will see you in a few minutes.
Now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
So before we take our break, are there any groups courageous enough to share what they talked about? Maybe one person chime in.
Well, I can share a little bit from our group because I was kind of the note taker. We looked at just kind of the whole initiation of COVID-19 and how companies dealt with it. What we saw in our group was, some some organizations were very proactive and, immediately made people remote. And, that could be an excitement of dealing with things and then turned into exhaustion eventually. And then on the other hand, we had someone else whose company delayed and kept insisting that people be in the office and the leaders be there. And essentially what happened was he left his job and others left their jobs. And there was a real breach of trust as a consequence of those actions. So kind of looking at the consequences, there was that feeling of breach of trust. And for those people who couldn't leave their job, they would be stuck and, being placed in a dangerous situation personally. But even when it was handled well, there's still that trauma of the ongoing event for the person who had the exhaustion. And now there's still not this belief that things are going to be okay necessarily when we all go back. So.
Sure. Sounds like a really good discussion.
And I'll add too, Mark, in terms of our group, one of the discussions is that some departments were able to work from home first. And because of that, you talk about morale, that could have led to a disaster in terms of people's beliefs about why a certain department was let, to go home, first or before others. So, I thought that was a really important piece that came up in our session, in our breakout.
Well, I'll share one quote. David Wright actually said this in our breakout group, and I love this phrase of, we might not all be in the same boat, but we're in the same storm. I just love that.
Yeah.
Apropos of that, one topic that came up in our group was anti-Asian bias and the many ways it shows up and is incredibly hurtful. I think we've talked very, very little about that kind of thing in our larger group, but it's more prevalent than we might think, or than some of us might think, and it's so bizarre and so shocking.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we take 5 minutes for a break? It's nearly the top of the hour. Why don't we all come back at 3 after the hour, and I will kick off a discussion about how do we lead to repair. See you in 5 minutes. Well, hello and welcome back. I hope everybody had just a good quick break. So we're going to move on and talk about repair today as part of the leadership process. And clearly, we've all had great challenges this past year. Thinking back to the words everyone wrote earlier with Mark to describe what you faced these past 17 months. We talked about trauma, how the uncertainty and the challenges and the stressors in our lives may have led to a natural trauma response for many of us. And Mike spoke about a really helpful cognitive behavioral rubric to really help us recover. And so next we'll talk about repair, which is a key part of the recovery process. Now, how do you go about repairing for yourself, for your community, and for your organization? After you respond to the immediate issue, like Casey was saying, you need some time to really digest what has just happened. You're not ready to talk about what has gone on. You need a little bit of time to really incorporate that into yourself and into your worldview. But after you respond to that, how do you repair? How do you then even reimagine and potentially emerge stronger from the trauma that has happened? And what does repair even mean? Well, repair looks somewhat different to each of us, to each organization, and to each situation. When there is a stressor or trauma, where, like we said earlier, like Mark was saying, we are not all in the same boat, but we are all trying to get through that same storm. We all experience the precipitating event differently, depending on a variety of factors, including our personal differences, our individual resiliency, our seat at the table, and our role within the organization. But ultimately, repairing is all about restoring something that is broken. It's about rebuilding or reconstructing in a better way, in learning from what you knew before and applying that to make things better, emerging stronger, more agile, more resilient. And so how do we each repair our own boat? Each of us has different things that we need to repair. And as a leader, you are leading that repair for your organization. So how do you go about that? What is your plan for rebuilding? How do you even know where to start repairing something that is broken? So I want to give you some key steps, some key tactical things that you can do as leaders to make sure you're repairing. And the first thing you need to do is acknowledge that something is broken and that repair is actually needed. And after you do that, you need to put your community, your workers, those you're responsible for, at the heart of the repair efforts. Start from a place of empathy. Gather feedback from those who are directly impacted. As someone said a lot more eloquently yesterday, those that are in the middle of the storm can best tell you what they need to survive the storm. Those directly impacted will have the greatest insights how to solve the problem. So rely on those insights. Survey your teams. They're included in the solution. When they're included in creating the solution, they're going to be more fully bought into that solution. We also need to hold ourselves accountable as leaders. Ask yourself, am I part of the problem? Take a good hard look at whether your biases, your actions, your history is holding back the repair process. You as the leader set the tone for your organization. Your words and actions reflect where your organization is going and must be in line with your values and vision. So you need to make sure as a leader, you're accountable and your behaviors reflect what you're saying. Also, assess what is broken, what is important, what is the right fix, what is the right solution. Use this as an opportunity to reimagine. So rank your organization's priorities, create a compelling vision, create a purpose, and build a roadmap to repair around that. Commit to how you're going to hold yourself accountable, how you're going to measure things moving forward, and then build a feedback loop and be transparent as you move forward with the repair. As leaders, it's our role to shape the culture. We must set the standard. We must be clear. We must have a compelling purpose for ourselves and our organization, and couple that with the rationale why this is the direction you're going. So how do you know when you're there? You know you're there when your organization is operationalizing the new or reestablished values. Reinforce these new ways and values during your one-on-ones at team meetings, and as you're developing your own new set of leaders in your organization. But remember, repair will look different for every group. It will look different within every group and for every situation. So next, we're going to do an annotation exercise, an interactive exercise focusing on different factors that impact how someone gets to repair. So we're gonna take 3 minutes for each of these, and we're gonna lead off. And I'm actually gonna go to each of the provocateurs to get us led off with some thoughts, and then I'll ask each of you to just write in some of your thoughts based on that. So first off, I'm going to go to Mike Selman. And Mike, how do issues of race, ethnicity, education, and income impact repair?
Thanks a lot, David. I'll start off with answering that question with education first. Albert Einstein once said, education is not the learning of facts, but the training of minds to think. The value of a school or college education is to train the mind to think critically and use acquired knowledge intelligently. Being successful in repair has more to do with attitude, passion, and determination. With that being said, the higher level of education you could certainly help you understand the importance of quickly seeking help and also accept new ways of thinking. Regarding income, high wage earners more resources for repair, such as hiring a life coach or a therapist, receiving a higher tier of medication if necessary, travel to a vacation spot for respite, or just to take time away from work to manage priorities, versus the low wage earners who may find it very challenging to obtain these same types of resources. Regarding race and ethnicity, we know repair varies depending upon different cultural beliefs, family upbringing, community support, religion, and geographical location. People from certain ethnic and cultural backgrounds may initially or solely present emotional distress via physical ailments or concerns. Various cultures approach emotional distress through the physical realm or view emotional and physical symptoms and well-being as one. The key factor is not to assume all races and ethnic groups deal with repair the same way. In individuals who are either older or functioning well prior to the trauma, such emotional situations is usually short-lived and represents an immediate reaction to the trauma rather than an ongoing pattern. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Mike. So really quickly, just want to have the group write in the annotation on the whiteboard. What are your thoughts on how do groups experience repair differently based on cultural differences, ethnic differences, differences in education and income? Any thoughts that people want to share on the whiteboard? Okay, well, I do think Mike covered it very well and very thoroughly. So let's move on to the next question, as I know where the clock is ticking for us. So next, I'm going to go to Mark Duffy and just ask, how are high-performing groups like senior leaders, what is important to know about how repair affects leaders and higher performing groups in an organization?
Thanks, David. And yes, everybody, please toss your answers in as I'm speaking, because I want to make sure that we have a chance to look at them. But I think the high performing groups, what we typically see is more denial and, I'm not really struggling with trauma. What are you talking about? And this overconfidence in their ability to manage it if it is there, if they do acknowledge it and become self-aware that, oh yeah, I am struggling, but it's not a big deal. I can handle this. This is what I do. I eat challenges like this for breakfast, and so there's this overgeneralization that, that getting help for trauma is for other people, not for me. Look at me, I'm a top sales leader, or I'm a senior leader within this organization. Come on, I can handle this. And so one of the hardest things is just getting them to acknowledge that something's wrong and that they are human, and that like all of us, we need to be able to pause and take care of ourselves. That is really one of the most crucial pieces here. Looking here, type A people really struggled slowing down. You're right. I worked with a group that had a sales team that traveled 80% of the time, and they were now stuck at home, and they were kind of going stir crazy. And how do you do that? How do you keep them performing? That exemplify control. Yes, these are people who are masters of their universe, and so feeling out of control is new to them. Too much guilt, paralyzing, feeling like they need to fix other people's problems. Yeah, think about that. As leaders, when people come to us, often our role is to help solve their problem, especially if they report to us. But in these moments, we might need to switch gears and just listen and pay attention and not really dive into problem solving immediately. That incredible denial, you're right, it is there. affects them whether they acknowledge it or not. Yeah, we're all human. We all experience the same things. It really comes down to, do you want to acknowledge it or not? So awesome conversation. Thank you. I know we're trying to hit on a lot, but I think we got the gist of the high performing groups. So David, I'll send it to you to keep us going.
Yep. Thanks. Thanks, Mark. And then one final question that I'm just going to throw out to the group is just thinking about people in your organization who are in different locations. They may be in different work environments. What is important to recognize about how they experience repair?
Big boy pants, big.
Big boy pants.
I would counter
Same.
that. What we try to tell people is, as leaders, we just need to be human. Above all, be human. Connect with people.
And also
But
big
how?
pants.
Yeah. So how does repair look differently? What should we factor in and know about people so they might not be feeling what we expect them to feel? We need to tailor our communication and approach to different variables that maybe that person can hear. Radical curiosity. Curiosity is king. Curiosity is key. Different access to support services. People from all walks of life have different access to different tools and resources. I think that's a critical thing to keep in mind as when you're thinking about people who you're trying to support. Your emotions aren't wrong. That's
I gotta
true.
add,
Go ahead, Casey.
Sorry, I gotta add, I was lucky enough to have a breakout room with Charlie and Sue Rose and Carol. And, you know, we've all kind of become experts on being in different locations and working apart as a team. Like all of us on this, obviously we're on a Zoom, right? And I learned from them that communication and creativity are key when you're talking about people who are in separate locations, who are trying to repair as a team. Communicate, 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 and be creative about it, because we're all experiencing something different. So Charlie and Sue and Carol, thank you for teaching me in our breakout room, because it's so poignant in this discussion about multi-location.
Well, great. Well, this is a great discussion, great ideas. Hopefully you can leave this section thinking about things about repairing a little bit differently and more fully. So this leads us to our next section with KC, talking about transforming to create the next normal.
Okay. So, you know, we've had some time together now, and I think we can all agree that we are at a period in our world, in our time, where there's a lot of change, there's a lot of transformation happening. And I think that we can say that the only thing that's been constant the past 18 months has been change. So how do we not be bystanders in this upcoming change? You know, how as leaders can we be active participants in harnessing this change to transform the teams that we are leading or the teams that we're a part of? How can we lead with greater emotional intelligence to address the diverse needs and this transforming workforce or transforming community that we're seeing? And how as leaders do we really make a difference? I think first and foremost, we learn from each other. The theme that I've heard, you know, throughout our conversation today is that we're not alone in this. And we really need to learn from each other. So as much as I hate to do it to y'all, we're going to do another annotation exercise because you guys are smarter than us. So Mark, if you could just flip to the first question here. What can we do differently to really help support our teams during this time? And your teams can be your family, your teams can be your work team, your teams could be the community you're in, but what can we do now that we understand trauma a little better, understand the obstacles and understand how we need to repair? What can we do differently to support our teams in this new world? Develop team vision. Heck yes. We need a common goal, right? We need to understand common challenges. Absolutely. I love that. Ask how people are doing and actually care about the answer.
You know, what's interesting is a lot of surveys show that today employees really want you to care. And I know we're from all different walks and different backgrounds and working in different organizations, but the people that you're leading, the people that you're working with, they really want you to care. And it's up to you to cross that bridge and hold out your hand and show them that you are. And I think in many ways, like I said earlier, it's about being human and demonstrating that you do care about how they're doing. But they will actually pick up on, do you actually care?
Provide every employee with a puppy. David, can you make that happen for our team?
I'll get those shipped out.
Yeah.
Stop, collaborate, and listen.
I just got this one. There you go.
Did somebody say stop, collaborate, and listen?
Dr.
It's
Wright.
on the board. I was just reading the board.
Oh my gosh, a little ice baby. I love this. Allow for mistakes, embrace mistakes. Yes. Yes. I think these are all wonderful responses, and it just shows all the different ways we can really support each other and support our teams for sure.
Absolutely. And label it trauma. Give it a name. It's not just another challenge that we're facing. We've been through a trauma, a shared experience.
Be real. Yes. Yes. We're all human, right? Okay. So maybe one more question, Mark. Okay. And this is an important one, maybe to be our last question to you all. What are the obstacles in creating our next normal? What are the obstacles that are in our way as leaders to really showing up for our folks on our teams? There's that word again, uncertainty. With the star next to it. Old world thinking, yep. Sometimes folks do not like change, right? I think we all have a tendency to fear change, and that can keep people having their stinking thinking. Sense of loss of the past. Yeah, that's true. We with trauma comes grief, right? And with change comes letting go of the past, and in some ways, not all the ways, but in some ways. And that is a difficult obstacle for sure.
And Casey, also, just so people know that, from trauma can also lead from a clinical standpoint to PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So, and you often will see that sometimes with people who had trauma in the military, or victims of sexual abuse, or victims of domestic violence. So sometimes trauma can bring up more trauma, later on down the road for you. So it's not something that necessarily just goes away, but you could be re-traumatized, as years go on. So, and that's where therapy comes into play. It's very important.
Yeah. Poor Nancy can't write on the whiteboard. Fear of change. Yeah.
Just write your comment into the chat, Nancy.
Yeah. Not knowing what others are thinking. Yeah.
I love that, trying to go back to what you've always done, we get back in our comfort zone, and to grow, you've got to get outside your comfort zone. I think that, and that's hard to do for all of us.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, the time is not our friend right now, David. I could keep on going like this and hearing from everyone forever, but we might get the hook here soon.
Well, as we get close to time, I want to leave everybody with this final thought. I love the quote, "Decisions are made by those who show up." And for so often, I always thought about the piece of the courage to physically show up and to voice your opinion. But as Howard has talked about both mornings, that one key piece to this summit is empowering conscious leadership. And so when I think of that quote, I think about what is the consciousness, what is the mindset of the leaders who are showing up to make the decisions? How have this past year, these past 18 months impacted them? How has the trauma they experienced influenced their values and their beliefs? Now is a time for leaders. And we need to be able to look back at ourselves to determine how we've been impacted, to make sure that we're truly showing up in a way that expresses our values and what we care about. And so we want to leave everybody with this idea. What is something that you're going to commit to doing differently? Thinking about the idea that we've all been impacted over this last year, but as leaders, we still need to show up, we still need to make decisions, but we need to be doing it in a way that reflects our values and not driven by the trauma or the negative experiences over this past year. So if you want to pop it into chat, that'd be great. But if not, at least take a moment to reflect on what is one thing you're going to commit to do differently now that we've had this discussion around self-awareness and how trauma can be impacting us. As we look at chat, we're going to read off some of those questions, but I just want to say from the whole group, we greatly appreciate this opportunity. We wanted to learn from you just as much as share with you. And I think that at least I've experienced that as well. So let's look at some of the topics here. We need to be personally uncomfortable to move forward. Yes, we need to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Not assume I can understand someone else's experiences. Absolutely. I think so often we want to connect with people, so we immediately start sharing stories saying, I know what you're going through, but that turns people off. They just want to know that their experience is unique and that you're hearing it. Don't forget about the ripple effect. And thank you for everybody who's saying, great session. We greatly appreciate it. Don't stop believing. How great were those two songs this morning? Take risks. Yes, this is a new world when it comes to that, and we need to be bold in the conversations we're having. Understand the importance of listening. Yes, as my mom would say, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Music and puppies. Nothing better than that. Well, I think we are at time, so thank you, everybody, and I will hand it back to Howard.
Thank you, Mark and David, Casey, and Mike. So much, very appreciated. Thanks for showing up. I think it's so interesting because, we've talked about societies, we've talked about communities, we've talked about individual repair, and we as leaders need to repair and lead to transformation and understand it. So thank you for the 4 provocateurs, and thank you very much to all the learners and teachers in our group through all the different exercises that we went through. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lyndon Rigo, one of our board members, as well as an incredibly important part of our planning and group. Lyndon?